Welcome to this Centre for Optimism and Brilliant Women Global collaboration. Three brilliant women talking about optimism and leadership through the pandemic and beyond. Amanda Caples, Janine Kirk, Jo Mikleus, and rounding off the panel, Robert Masters, Joseph Ghaly, and yours truly, Victor Perton.
Victor Perton here, and welcome to the Optimism Cafe. This is the Centre for Optimism's first online Optimism Cafe with the Brilliant Women Global. We've done events together with Brilliant Women Global in the physical space, but this is our first online event. So it's g'day to Janine.
Hello, Victor, how are you?
Terrific. Joseph?
Of course you are, you're optimistic.
Joseph, how are you today? Jo Mikleus, welcome.
How are you doing?
Excellent, thank you. Robert Masters, welcome.
Hi, Victor, thank you.
Amanda Caples, welcome.
Hi, Victor. Hello, everyone.
We have three brilliant women from Brilliant Women Global. My good friend Amanda Caples, the lead scientist for Victoria, and we've done incredible things just trying to promote optimism around malaria and what she does in terms of driving innovation. And Amanda has a wonderful quote where she says, look, innovation is not for engineers and scientists. She says it's for everyone. Janine Kirk, I first knew in her marvellous work saving the City of Melbourne and the state of Victoria from becoming the rust bucket state. And I won't say how many decades ago that is, but
Please
Janine Kirk has been a great leader. Prince Charles sought her out to lead his charities in Australia. And now she is the chairman of Phoenix Australia, which is one of the fantastic organisations dealing with trauma and mental health. And fantastic work. And Jo Mikleus, who is the chairman of the advisory board for Brilliant Women Global. I first got to know her during the G20. Her brilliance in organisational skills, her brilliance in policy was just fantastic. And the other two gentlemen I don't need to introduce. I think you all know the two, Joseph and Robert. But Rob's the chairman of the Centre for Optimism, and Jo is the founder of Brilliant Women Global. So the first question we always ask in these optimism cafes is, what makes you optimistic? So may I start with you, Amanda? What makes you optimistic? What gives you hope through this pandemic and beyond?
Thanks, Victor. I mean, what makes me optimistic is the fact that it doesn't really matter what the world throws at us. The ability of mankind to come together and partner to respond to that. So I think our ability, no matter how daunting the challenge is that together we can always find a solution, and it might not be the immediate solution, but it's it takes us down a path that leads to resolution and improved outcomes. So that's what makes me optimistic, is the power of the collective to really get behind and produce solutions to some of our challenges.
Janine Kirk, what makes you optimistic? What gives you hope through the pandemic and beyond?
Well, Victor, first of all, optimism is a choice. You choose to be optimistic. And I think that we all need mission and purpose in life. And to have that, you have to be optimistic about the future. I think I certainly agree with Amanda. I think during this pandemic, the one thing I think has stood out is people collaborating, caring for themselves, working together. And I just do hope it's going to continue past the pandemic, because we have getting so much done in terms of public policy around this time. Let's just keep the train on the tracks and going, because we really need to, I think, as we come out of the pandemic, we're going to need to, it's going to be a brand new world. So we're going to need to really ensure that that collaboration continues and that partnership continues. So look, I'm optimistic because I think nature is optimistic. I mean, we were discussing the backdrop I've got here today. This is the view from we've got a small property up just outside Corryong. The area was devastated by the recent bushfires, and yet nature is coming back in an extraordinary way. So nature makes me optimistic in that sense. And since we're part of nature, we're an integral part of nature, then that's why I'm optimistic.
Joe Mikleus, what makes you optimistic? What gives you hope through the pandemic and beyond?
Well, apart from being a natural optimist, I suppose, Victor, and most problems with a glass half full perspective, I have found myself in a chief risk officer role, managing a company through this pandemic. And so that's been a really interesting period. And I guess galvanising the team and the business around an alignment and a purpose to what we need to do together to work our way through whatever thrown out with light on the hill. You know, it's not to walk away from, you know, decisions that have to be made, and even the difficulty of working in isolation is a bit of a challenge. Heading frequently, that vision of the future, and everyone's contribution to those goals is I guess how I like to think about it.
Joe Ghaly, tell us what makes you optimistic, what gives you hope through the pandemic?
Yeah, thank you, Victor. And of course, gorgeous and very insightful comments from Joe, Janine and Amanda. So I really appreciate their comments. I think one memento to this pandemic and pushing through it that comes to mind for me is just being able to stop and reflect. And I think any disruption, you know, if we choose to be reflective and think a little bit more in time, as in take our time about where we're heading, I think that's it's quite a bonus, quite a blessing that I'm seeing from a lot of people.
And Robert Masters, Chair of the Centre for Optimism, what makes you optimistic? What gives you hope, Robin?
Thank you, Victor. Well, I think just talking to leaders and listening to leaders and the direction in which they take, as long as we put realistic optimism into effect with our strategies, I'm more than happy to see where the future will take us. And I think we've got 3 leaders here that are actually, we're in good hands with the 3 of them and taking us through this and what they want to achieve.
And Rob, do you want to lead off on asking our panellists about their leadership?
Yes, well, I think one of the key things today is leadership, and where does that leadership take us? And therefore, my underlying aspect to all this is what style or what are the key attributes that you see that leaders need to have today to get people to have an optimistic outlook for the future. So, Janine, do you want to start off?
Yes, thanks, Rob. Rob, I think the key issue around leadership is based on trust. If people trust you, they'll follow you. And I think really, as Joe was mentioning, you know, you have to put the light on the hill. People need to be uplifted. They need to feel that they're contributing to something sort of beyond themselves. So I think the role of leaders is to describe the light on the hill. And as you said, it has to be realistic. We're not talking about being silly about these things, but to be realistic about the light on the hill, to communicate and to ensure that there is trust there. So you have to be open. You know, you have to say, look, I don't know everything, you know. And I think leadership is not just the leader, you know, the person at the top of the organisation. There is leadership throughout an organisation. And I think it's times like these that you encourage that leadership to step forward. And that's how people grow in an organisation. So, for example, in the organisation that I chair, I sent out an email and said, look, the board is with you all. We're working, directly with the senior leadership to get us through this. But I said, everyone in this organisation has something to contribute. So if you have any ideas, please, let senior leadership know, because they're not the only ones that have ideas and can contribute to something. So I think leadership is about an openness. I think it's about realistic optimism. I think it's describing and communicating the light on the hill. And I think it's about trust. And it's actually demonstrating the behaviour you want. So I have to say, for Jacinta Ahern and her political leadership team to say we're taking a 20% cut in our salaries because we really are in this together, I thought that was a terrific, not even a gesture, just having that empathy, understanding what other people are going through. We are in this with you. And I think some of our leadership could have taken some of that advice.
Very good. Your answer reflects a little bit of what John Hagel was saying the other day, and that he said leaders should be able to have the answers to everything, but not have the depth of knowledge to be able to answer them. Therefore, as you just said, defer to others and let others contribute to the outcome. So it was a very interesting position that he took, and it was reflective of a Paris scientist who's working with Merkel and Sarkozy. And he also said the same, that from a risk point of view, you've got to bring others into the camp and have faith in them. So it's very true.
Well, it's about respect at the end of the day, isn't it? It's respect for other people and respect for that they have views and they can contribute to solutions.
Yeah, very true. Amanda, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So yeah, look, I think Janine's really described it beautifully. The thing that I would add, and what I think has been remarkable over the past 2 months, has been the extent of the community engagement with the responses to COVID-19. And I think that was unexpected. I think many of us didn't believe that we would, as a society, as a community, respond in such a purposeful way or a deliberate way and pay attention to what our leaders were asking of us. And I think in part it goes to the fact that there was, and it goes back to many of the points that Janine raised, is having what does everyone want at the end of the day, no matter where we are in our professional life or family life, is to have that sense of purpose and have that really articulated, and having a plan on how you're going to get there, as well as confidence in terms of having some degree of certainty that that plan will be pursued with modification as circumstances change, and to communicate it really, really well and crisply and clearly and confidently. And I think that the fact that we've had such great community engagement is a large part to the leadership of our politicians, of our business people. And I think it's really helped everybody to really improve their own leadership experience, as well as deliver the outcomes, touch wood, that we continue to, or that we have achieved, and that we need to move into a next phase. So the nature of it might change, but each of us have had our own personal experience of leadership that hopefully will stay with us and will adapt to the situation as it evolves.
Rob, if I could just pop in, Amanda's got that wonderful background of the space age behind her. Amanda, you took a real risk in throwing a big effort at the space industry in Victoria.
Yes.
Want to talk about that risk you took to take that leadership position?
Oh, look, it was really to, so we had, and look, you know, what's more inspirational than thinking about how you can get into space and how you can participate in what is a global endeavour, and no doubt will somewhat be set back, I would imagine, given the priority on you know, on getting us, on resolving the economy and the like. But I think there are a lot of parallels actually between space and what we are experiencing now, because space is effectively an environment, is an isolated environment, is a hostile environment that poses new challenges that you need to solve for. And we have a lot of those environments here on Earth, whether it be Antarctica, whether it be in deserts and so on. And I think there's a great opportunity to look at challenges differently and broadening the range of challenges that need to be looked at. And if you take away the support systems that one currently has on Earth and think about how you deliver those services and respond to those challenges in a hostile remote environment, just opens up the mind to think about this differently and look at, well, what is it actually that we need in order to overcome that particular challenge? And so yes, so we continue to advocate for space technologies in Victoria, and working, of course, with the Australian Space Agency and with space agencies around the world to try and build the right teams to respond to some of these things, these challenges, and I would expect that some of the responses and the solutions that we derive will be applicable. I wasn't thinking of COVID-19 at the time, but, you know, for helping us in our current situation.
I throw back to Rob and Joe.
Well, I was just going to pick up on one thing that Janine said and ask Amanda. And Janine was talking about trust in leaders and what they're doing. How have you found people's response to trust in science now? Has it elevated your belief in people's capability to recognise the value of science?
Look, I think so. And that is one of the things that I've noticed over the past 12 months or so. We're starting and we're starting to see our leaders seeking scientific evidence, and we've always had, well, mostly have had an evidence-based policy position, certainly at a state and at a federal level, but it's really stepped up a notch. And the fact that we have, I think, scientists are better at portraying that there are different, that not everyone's in agreement on everything, that we can't possibly know everything, and having the ability to put forward evidence in a way in which is about illuminating the, you know, shedding light on where the solution might lie without being didactic. It's black and white, and whether it's, you know, on clinicians and how we have seen our leaders responding to the epidemiology modelling and a whole range of contributions that have emerged from the scientific community. And I think there's been a new respect for that science in recent times, and I hope that that continues because it's really important that we need to do due diligence around the science to make sure that the right questions are asked in the right context. Otherwise, we will undermine everything that we've achieved. But I think science can make such a strong contribution, and, you know, and 9 times out of 10, it's being presented in that right context.
And Joe, when we're looking at leadership, and you mentioned governance in your current role there. Trust and accountability becomes key elements to that. And you were talking about how to get the team on side. So how do you see the whole style of leadership and communication and their responsibilities?
So Janine and Amanda have made some really good points there. And I think perhaps one thing to add is around composure. And we're actually dealing with a situation that has never been experienced before. And that is great because you can a new way, but it's also, there's no textbook to refer to. So, you know, anchoring in the facts and knowledge that is available rather than commentary is really, really important. So being well informed on the data, what's going on in the external environment, and bring that into the organisation that you're leading, and so that you have a really well thought through response plan that covers all dimensions of the business. We did in my organisation, we actually started with our people first, and if we had their health and well-being well managed, if you like, then we turned to our customers and operations and technology, and then through to how, because if we get all of that right, well then that's going to help us from a financial perspective. So really thinking through that from end to end. And then I think really sharp execution and helping your team to be very focused on what is the most important thing that they need to be working on right now to help us, ourselves and our company through this crisis. The other thing which taps into the optimism is there are always opportunities in times of difficulty, and so having one eye on opportunities is really.
Thank you for that, Joe. I think, Victor, we've got a whole lot of questions I see mounting up, so I'll hand it back to you to take us through this.
Yeah, and Joe, you're spot on. It's we opened the world's first Optimism shop in December, and of course it had to shut because of stage 3. But on the other hand, our membership has doubled this month, so quite extraordinary. So. So we've got some great questions. Lisa's question, what has been your read on employee experiences through this period? So Joe, you run a pretty big team. Amanda, you've got a big department. Janine, you've got a team of people working on other people's well-being. What's been the employee experience through this period?
I think the interesting thing is when we had a meeting with the senior management at Phoenix, they were commenting on how delighted they were that the next level down of management had stepped up, that they were really actually seeing this in a sense as a leadership opportunity, but not only that, they actually stepped up. And I think they were delighted that that had happened because it shows the strength and depth of the organisation in terms of leadership. Look, it's always difficult when people are working from home, and particularly those with children who are trying to homeschool as well. But we touch base with the staff every day, so that we ensure that those, for example, who are living alone, that can be very, very difficult. It's difficult enough with children, but it's also difficult if you're on your own and isolated. So it's a matter of understanding what staff are experiencing and ensuring that there is regular contact. So, as I say, it's been fantastic the way people have pulled together. And I suppose when you have sort of an external threat, you know, the group, the tribe comes together, and then to address that external threat. So, but they're doing it with great sense of humour, great purpose, and you know, really good leadership skills being shown throughout the organisation.
Joe?
I would say that, you know, that level of communication has been key to maintaining employee experience, because, you know, when people are distributed the way that they've been forced to be distributed, and kind of being connected into the organisation, what's happening, even if there's no news, having forums available to make sure that they do to the decision making and what's actually happening inside of the organisation. It's amazing, so similar to Janine, how innovative communication channels and forums have popped up. So in my group, you know, one of my general managers is single, actually just moved to Melbourne to take on this, moved to Melbourne to take on this job in February. She started, and she's living alone. She's managing a team that she doesn't know so well, because it was only a month into the role when this pandemic, and she's single. And so she has started a kind of a single WhatsApp group, and they kind of take care of each other. They check in, and if they haven't heard from members of the group, they check in on well-being and making sure that the team are doing okay. You know, there's a parents group, and we regularly have the most junior people kind of talking about homeschooling with their day job and being flexible and so forth. So it's amazing what kind of innovation has come through with this. And in some ways, I actually wonder whether employee engagement, despite the difficulties, is actually going to go up through this period because of the way that it's been managed.
If I can tell you something funny, one of the people on in the attendees is single, and they said to me that Zoom conferences, they meet a much better quality of person than dating apps. So
there you go.
and the hint to everyone there is you can do speaker view, so you can see the person who's speaking, or if you go to gallery view, you will see us as a Brady Bunch as we grow with people asking questions. Thank you very much, Lisa. I think that was a great... Oh, sorry, Amanda, you've got a huge department that is trying to keep the economy propped up. How are your people going?
Okay, thanks, Victor. So I think so. Each team has a different sort of internal process in terms of how they're keeping up to date with everyone. I think what's been remarkable is that, so first of all, I think my own personal experience is that I found use of the tools that we're currently on to be so much better than I had expected. So the barrier to using these telecommunication tools is so much lower than my recollection. So that was one thing. And we've been using this means across the department. So the secretary of the department has been running all staff engagements using these sorts of platforms. And for the first couple of weeks, it was weekly, and I think it's now about fortnightly or thereabouts. And actually, we previously had only engaged with staff on twice a year in bringing everyone together. And what it's demonstrated for us is, well, there's so many more options available, and the feedback from staff has been terrific. And there's been much closer engagement and feeling connection with leadership as a consequence of just communicating more regularly and knowing that everyone has access to that communication. It's not just the executive team. The other thing that I'd like to make, and I don't have children at home, so the homeschooling thing for me hasn't been an issue. But one of the positive, and I'm sure that there's a mix of experiences, both positive and not so positive, but one that I'd like to share is a colleague has a 9-year-old who has a little bit of a behavioural disorder, and so what she's found is that she's really been able to bond with this child to better understand how they learn, when they learn, and how to manage it, that she's developed a whole new relationship. So getting to know your kids is and getting to know your partner perhaps, or it can go either way. I must admit, but there are a lot of stories, I think, of greater engagement as a consequence of this.
Brilliant, brilliant. Kate Clancy, you had a question you wanted to raise with the panel.
Yes, thank you, Victor. Thank you, panel. What a great way to spend a Wednesday evening, I think. I work with leaders, particularly when they're trying to change their culture, and the topic of trust comes up very, very frequently. So it was great to hear you speak about that, Janine. Thank you. When I boil trust down, I see one of the key components of trust as being care. And it's interesting because care is quite often seen as a gender-based strength that's more often found in women than men. So how do you push care as a key attribute and skill for leaders, irrespective of whether they're male or female?
Who's going to start? Will I make a comment?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Care is something that you can't manufacture. You can't pretend to care. Well, you can, but people see through it. And I guess, people keep referring to this, the authentic leadership style, be the authentic you. Well, I don't know how you can't be authentic, quite frankly. I mean, people can see through when they don't feel that it is genuine. So look, I don't know whether you can train people to care, but I think this has been an interesting time during this pandemic, because I think, as was said before, I think by Joe, that it's been a time where people have actually reflected. We've actually had time to reflect. And I do hope when we come out of this that we are going to be a kinder world, that we are going to be kinder to each other. I don't know whether that's going to be reflected in Twitter feeds or, Instagrams or whatever, but I do hope that we are, because I think this has certainly demonstrated to me that, life is short. We're basically going to, if you like, inverted commas, waste a year. We should just go on to 2021, quite frankly. And the years go by very quickly, and it's not until you get to my age you realise that. So I just hope that people are going to be kinder out of this, and maybe, having had the time to reflect, those who haven't demonstrated that in their work environment, might think more about it. But bearing in mind, we're incentivised in certain industries to not show emotion, to not show care, to be the biggest deal maker there is, and and boys with their shiny toys and all that sort of thing. So, again, the culture that's created either encourages and respects care and appreciates it, or in fact doubles down against it, depending on what sort of industry you're in. So that's a bit of a rambling answer to your question, but I think you just got to be authentic, and if you don't care, you're never going to be able to be taught how to care. I mean, we know we all have met psychopaths and others at work who certainly don't, demonstrate those characteristics. But I just hope we're going to come out of this and be a bit kinder to each other.
I'm certainly not seeing it as a we've been anchoring a lot of our decisions actually around this notion of showing care. So initially, our employees, having care for our business, that we're making good decisions, through the crisis, having care for our customers and making sure we're looking after them through this period, and understanding they're going through periods of difficulty. So I actually think you're in your leadership attribute, and that it's really vital to be making that linkage to trust as well. So yeah, great point to raise.
I think Carolyn Ward wanted to supplement that, sharing something she heard the other day on the female versus the male. And Caroline has moved back from Chile to Australia. So.
No, actually, I'm not. I'm in Sydney and I'm in a hospital. I didn't think I was going to be able to come in tonight, but I'm waiting on some tests. So my question is based on what something John Hagel said last week, and it's not based on that, but it was great to hear him say that the future would belong to the leaders who could embody the feminine archetype. And he said, you know, check out his TED, he did a short TED talk. And I think it's really easy to say those things. And I don't think it's about, and he said, actually, Victor, it's not about male and female, it's a different archetype, feminine archetype, and trust and care are some components of that. But he said that can be embodied by either women or men. So my question to the panel, to all the panelists, is, what do you does that sound reasonable to you? And I think we can see in this time that the women leaders who have embodied maybe more of this have been doing really well, as was quoted at the beginning with Jacinda Ardern. But what would be some of the attributes that you would say would be fundamental in this archetype, that you would expect to see emerging, not just in individuals, but in a way of kind of being, working, living, leading? So that's my question in general.
I'm happy to take a first answer.
Great, Amanda.
So for me, I think it's, and again, I think you're right in terms of saying that everyone can have these attributes, but how I think about the difference in what I see in my observations and my experience between the female archetype, so to speak, and the male archetype is that females are more likely to have a team-based approach and be less hierarchical, whereas my experience has been the more competitive, hard-nosed, which is not to say that women can't be that either, but is more typical of a male archetype. So that's a generalisation, but I think to me is what I experience as being the significant difference between a female style leadership, which it's about getting the job done and knowing that others have some value to add and we're focused on that outcome rather than because of I want to be, a superstar or some description, or be on that trajectory. And I think it goes back to just how how they view getting things done, and it's a way that things get done rather than what gets done, which is the difference.
Janine, Joe?
I would probably just add to what Amanda's is with inclusion. So having quite an inclusive leadership is probably what I would translate to that archetype, if you like, and making sure that all voices are heard and that the team are kind of being brought along for the journey, and maybe that's the care aspect as well, of making sure that all opinions are good opinions, that when it does get made and you move with pace and so forth. But yeah, maybe that word inclusion to supplement what you said, Amanda.
One of the other interesting things that he said, which I thought was the kind of interesting spark, he said that psychology mattered more than strategy, which I think is interesting too.
Well, thank you for making the effort to join us from hospital, Caroline.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
I think, Glenys, you had a question and a comment.
Yeah, I did. I've been musing over
that I think humanity has shown an incredible interest in saving itself in this crisis. Some might say, bracket selfishly. And I'm just wondering how we can transfer that extraordinary commitment to save itself to now addressing some of the more very serious issues facing the planet around the flora, the fauna, the oceans, the air. How can we transfer this commitment that humanity's made for itself to recognising the need to not only have people prosper in life, which we all want, but also to not destroy our environment along the way? And it's how to take this experience and move it forward in such a way that it optimises for the planet and for everybody what's needed. I'm just not sure that, you know, I know I'm on an optimism Zoom, but it's how you take that and actually make a difference to the bigger picture.
It's almost like Mother has told us to all go home and think about it. Think long and hard about it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, look,
look, I think the UN came out today and basically posed that exact question. And I think no one's got the exact answer or the plan for that. I think there's a lot of momentum. Well, I know there's a lot of momentum around environment, climate change, and you know, both, so UK, Australia, all Australian states have a commitment to net zero by 2050. And I think, you know, I would like to think that the prospect of Delhi having clean air, of being able to see the Himalayas, of all of those things will make people really think about what is contributing to that, and how can we do things differently as to mitigate us getting back to that position. And so I think there's a conversation to be had, and maybe empowering the community to be part of developing the solutions, because I don't think anyone's really got the answer, but that together, working in a structured way, that we can do better and seize this opportunity, that and it makes something good come out of what is, you know, a travesty.
Glenys, I'll just make, if I can just make one comment. You know, Australia's in, you know, sort of a fairly short period suffered drought, bushfires, floods, and now pestilence. If we don't see that we're part and we've got a symbiotic relationship with nature, I don't know when we'll ever see that. And really, as Amanda said, the fact that so much industry is closed down, there's not the cars on the roads. I'm sure everyone's seen on their Twitter feeds that the animals that are actually coming into the cities now because there isn't even any traffic. Yeah. So we've seen the environment recover, not a lot, but at least recover. And again, it's very obvious. So I think for those who don't think that we're part of something greater than ourselves, after experiencing all that, that nature has thrown at us, then really there is no hope for us. But because, as you said, this is an optimistic Zoom link, I do think people, you know, realise that, you know, we are part of the solution, and we need to take responsibility as sentient beings to be able to take action on these things. But they're not certainly going to happen overnight. But it's, I think we just realise that we're, look, as I say, look at the background that I'm against. How can you not realise that, you know, we have a responsibility to nature and to the environment?
I think Jeff Kerbell's got a great follow-up question. Thank you for that, Glenys.
Welcome.
Thank you, Victor. This is probably as much for Amanda, Joe and Janine. I think one of the things that is often accepted or seen is that people's true colours come out in difficult times, not in good. To what extent are you seeing that, and I make a very clear distinction, as Joe will know, between leadership and management, and we have certainly an overload of management in Australia, but probably a dearth of leadership, I would say. So what extent are you seeing that people that have been elevated to management are perhaps not stepping up? And conversely, and more optimistically, what are you seeing in terms of perhaps true leaders emerging from much lower down in organisations?
Maybe I can start off on that. Look, I think, and as I related before in our organisation, that there have been people stepping up, you know, that were leaders but low down in the organisation, but have really, it's been noticeable that they've stepped up, which is very exciting. And I think given the opportunity, often people do. You know, management also has the history of preventing, you know, putting a lid on people's capability and people of talent for a whole range of reasons. So I think these sort of circumstances do bring out the best and they bring out the worst, as you said. There's always going to be bottom feeders. They're always there. They're never going to go away. Unfortunately, government often reacts to that by putting more regulation in, more levels of management, because it's trying to respond to, you know, bad behaviour, where I think 80%, 90% of people want to do the right thing. So look, I think I've seen in just in our organisation that people have stepped up. And I think also management realises, you know, senior management, they certainly don't have all the answers. As we've all said, this is challenging times. This has never been experienced before in our lifetimes. So, you know, you've got to draw on leadership at all levels in the organisation. You've got to you reach down and get innovation and ideas in all levels of the organisation. And I think that's I think it's exciting. I think some of those barriers have broken down, which is not before time. I just hope we keep it that way.
Precisely. And I would say that those really good leaders are reaching deep in the organisation. They are showing some vulnerability as well, that they don't have all the answers. And I think that's really, really important and a sign of great leadership over management where, you know, as you say. So, yeah, 100% behind you there.
Bernie Kelly, you've got a question to follow up Jeff's point.
Yeah, just I'm loving the conversation, including the powerful combination of caring and the science piece. But there is there is momentum that goes the other way. So I guess a bit of a question there, like coming out of here, what are we going to be doing more proactively to be getting more of that sort of conversation, you know, from here?
Okay.
Thanks, Amanda.
You're welcome, Ben. Look, I think, so having more engagement. So community engagement is really, really important, because every conversation that you have with people from different walks of life around, it doesn't matter whether it's an opportunity or a challenge, you know, just that, you know, that the whole point around diversity is that you get the different points of view. And I think that, you know, up until this point, we have been doing engagement, you know, and good leaders always have sought a variety of views and sought to distill that. And it's been very much within an organisation where that, so if it's happened, it's been within an organisation. What I go back to a point I made earlier, I'm sensing a change in society or community, and I don't know whether it's sustainable or not. I think it's a good thing in terms of people taking greater responsibility for not only their own personal outcomes, but for the broader community. And so what I'd like to see, and I'm thinking about, so I practice it across in a professional sense across the community, the stakeholders that I'm particularly responsible for, so particularly university leadership and driving industry business engagement. So I'm a pharmacologist. I always use this, so I can't not say this. So as a pharmacologist, it's always about what we call receptor-ligand binding reactions, where the receptor is the problem or the opportunity, and bringing the right ligand, which comprises both the composition and then the construction, the structure of those molecules, coming to bear for a period of time to address the opportunity or the challenge. And it doesn't need to be a permanent arrangement, but long enough to make a difference, to make change happen. And so I think if the community can identify and step up from the responsibility that we're all taking on, whether it be environment, whether it's about the social fabric of our local community, I think we've all got the capacity to do that. And if we can, through our professional experiences, diffuse some of that know-how, so to speak, without crowding it out, and being inclusive in getting people to engage with it, that I think would be a good thing to do.
Now we've gone 50 minutes and it feels like 10 minutes. It's such a rich conversation. So I've got 4 questions left on the Q&A. So I think if we deal with those fairly quickly, and then each of the panelists provide some conclusion, and then when we reach the 7 o'clock mark, we'll formally end. But like we've done on the other occasions, it's a chance to hold a glass of wine and keep up the conversation and talk over each other. Noirin, you've got a question to ask?
Yes, thanks for unmuting me there, Victor. Hi everyone. As a woman, I love this conversation that we're all having here this evening. As a woman, I sort of wonder, will we get to a time where we start discussing people as opposed to gender when we describe leaderships and abilities and all kinds of other things that we describe people? I mean, I would love to see, as a bit of an optimist, I would love to see us doing that one day. And then I think perhaps true equality could happen, maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Anyone?
Look, I think that's absolutely true. And what that means is we just recognise people for their abilities and talents. And it's people. It's not, a woman is meant to behave this way or that way. But I do think we have to get rid of some of the gender language. If a woman is out there and is confident and whatever, often she's called aggressive, because that's not how women are meant to behave. And so some of that gender language really still exists, and it really annoys me, because there's an expectation about how a woman would behave and how a man would behave. And when you don't meet that expectation, then, it undermines, I think, the respect for the talent. So, look, I agree with you, and I'm an optimist, so I hope that it happens certainly in our lifetimes, that people are recognised for their abilities and talents, they're respected for what they can contribute, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah. Love it.
Ernest Stabek, I can see you with, you've got your Mickey Mouse ears on. What question did you want to raise?
Well, I was following on really from Amanda's comment around the step change in responsibility. I was just keen to hear from the other panelists as well what they thought we could do individually to help that step change happen.
We'll be a member of Brilliant Women Global, of course.
Good start.
Or having conversations as these, such diverse backgrounds that all of us have, and bringing that diversity of opinion together to actually, so each of us individually then go away and can apply some of that different thinking in whatever it is. So, I'm learning a bunch from the discussion today, and just thinking about how can I translate some of that into what I do tomorrow. and the next day. So I think conversations like these are really important with people who are different points of view and from different perspectives.
I think what I was searching for was the one takeaway we could all take from this session to make that step change in individual responsibility. So I know it's a hard question because it's something I seek every day with groups, is to get them to improve themselves. So, but thank you.
That might be a good poll question we'll use next time, Ernest, or maybe we can do that as a large survey, because I think we're so diverse, there must be 100 actions we can take away. But I think Janine's edict, let's all join brilliant women,
yep.
Is, I think, a very powerful thing. And it's open to men and women. So
and it's founded by a man. There you go.
Exactly. Now, Sally Arnold, who's joined us from the Gold Coast, represents some of the biggest media companies in the world in Australia, the Washington Post and National Geographic and the like. And you wanted to talk a little bit about female leadership and COVID.
Yes. Thank you, Victor. Thank you. And thank you for the discussion this evening. It's been enlightening, and there's many things that have been said, particularly with you, Janine, all around with your leadership around trust and describing the light on the hill. And yeah, this point of trust, I think it is what it comes back to. There was a fantastic article this week in the Washington Post, and it talked to the leadership and the female leaders around the world that are doing particularly well in their containment of COVID-19, and that being around the voice of reason and the trust that they were actually being delivering into their audiences with their citizens. So we're already seeing some success from that. My question is, in terms of the proof points as we come out of the pandemic, what would you see in your respective fields that can demonstrate leadership in success? What would those proof points be considered, and would they have a female lens more so as we move into this coming decade?
Can I just add another question? Olivier Lambel has got lots of little children running around him, so he said he doesn't want to come on video. But his additional question to what Sally has just asked is, what has Jacinta Ardern revealed to you during this crisis? Inspiration, best leadership in crisis time. Is there hope for the future? So that's just a little additional question to throw in.
I think with the benefit of hindsight side of this crisis, the best leaders will be the ones who actually took the opportunity that of making change and leading and kind of perhaps making some hard decisions that that were previously difficult to do. So I'm a big believer that actually through managing through these difficulties, what the difficulties are, whether it's from a health perspective or financial difficulties or kind of helping in a large employee base or whatever, I think that there is an ability to think about what the future is for the company, tapping into and using this time to really innovate and make some substantive changes that actually stride you towards the future. And I don't think it's kind of has a gender kind of bias to it either. It's really around responding first instance. I think of it like resetting, so making the decisions to actually reset or rebase the business that you want to be, and then on the other side, you kind of take advantage, able to really renew in kind of whatever the post-COVID-19 world looks like.
And then the last question, if you can take this with that other one, Janine, because you and I have talked about it. The last provocative question comes from Scott. To what extent are we living in an Orwellian period? You know, the fear and the anxiety, and yet people coming together and forgetting their differences to defeat a common enemy. So do you want to lead off with that, Janine?
I actually think this period has absolutely unleashed innovation. So many companies are having to pivot, are having to look and re-examine why they exist, and hopefully they still will exist. But there's an enormous amount of work that's happening. It's just generating great innovation. And I just hope coming out of this, that drive, particularly in Australia, because I think we'd lost through bureaucracy, through lack of risk-taking, because we'd had it good for so long, we had lost that drive for innovation. And I do hope companies and organisations will continue that pathway, because that is the thing that will drive us out of this. So I think that, you know, it's an opportunity for all the terrible downsides. And, you know, because I'm an optimistic, I'll just put that optimistic, I'll just put that to one side. That I do think that I hope we continue just the innovation that we're all going through. And redefining, and I think, as you said, Joe, really pivoting and trying to lock down what is our business going to be as we come out of this. And hopefully government will get out of the way in terms of allowing that innovation and support small business. I mean, everyone says they support small business, but you see it very rarely. Let's just hope, you know, through this, that there's going to be support for innovation in small business.
Well, we've hit the 7 o'clock mark and each of the panelists has been very generous. So maybe answering Ernest's question, what's the last takeaway point that each of the panelists wants to give us? Do you want to start with Amanda, Joe, Janine? What's our go out and do after listening to you?
Well, apart from saying innovation is for everyone, not just for scientists and engineers, and I think everyone across the community gets that now because of the fact that we're just living the experience. I think hope and the ability that we've all got. So I think empowerment, that we've all got the ability to change and an ability to contribute to making a difference.
Yes, and I think, look, let's all be really positive about the future and the potential, actually, that we can take through this time. Whether it is, you know, the responsibility that we've talked about to our planet, to our families, to our work colleagues and employees. I think it's really grounded us in, you know, what's important in life and what's important in leadership, and let's just be really positive about the future and lead the way through it.
Janine?
I'm really excited about the future. I think that there are companies and organisations and people who are looking at all sorts of unusual collaborations that they would never have thought of previously. You know, they're looking at how they can better serve their client base when we come out of this. I personally think, you know, apart from the health issues and the isolation issues, all the ones we know about, I think it could be a really exciting time, because I do think, as Joe said, you know, we've had time to reflect. You know, we've got the opportunity to do things differently. Let's take it. Yeah. Let's take it. Let's don't hesitate. Let's don't load it with bureaucracy. Let's just let ourselves loose and really start to drive this country forward in a different way, that we're on a different trajectory than we would have been. So let's take advantage of it.
Let the energy loose. My favourite writer wrote of my political philosophy that it's the liberation of living spiritual energy, and you are three remarkable leaders. I've known each of you for a very long time. And if ever I had to place my faith in a leader, it's each of you three. Rob Masters, do you want to thank the panelists?
I definitely do, Victor. And I think the big takeout, as you just said, is that we've had three brilliant women here this evening giving us their views. And I think the optimism that has come out of all the discussion is food for thought for everyone. So thank you very much to Janine and Amanda and to Joe. It's been a marvellous session. Thank you.
And Joseph, Ghaly, do you want to wind up?
Yeah, Victor, thank you. I have had so much fun tonight on this webinar and have so many learnings to take away for my own leadership practice. So, you know, heartfelt thanks to all attendees, and a special thanks to our panelists, Amanda Caples, Janine Kirk, and Joe Mikleus. And I must say, you know, with inclusion in mind, you can't be in a leadership position unless you have followers. So I think a leader needs to call on their courage to be inclusive and you know, take into account all of the diverse opinions and thoughts that are out there. And that sometimes clashes with, you know, where we've come to be who we are today. But it's a fine balance. I think it takes a bit of courage. And to the centre of optimism, I think we're all a lot more optimistic after this evening. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you. Everyone who needs to leave can leave. As you'll see, I'm lifting a few of you up to panel. Those who want to have a bit of a chat for 10 or 15 minutes, I can see Kay waving kisses to us and a thank you. Thank you, Kay. So thanks again, panelists. Thanks again, Rob and Joseph. Thanks to everyone. And now you're all welcome to have a gossip. Thanks.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this collaboration between Brilliant Women Global and the Centre for Optimism. We'd love you to get involved with the Centre for Optimism. And if you'd like to go to our website and to the Join Us link and subscriptions, use the code BRILLIANT in capital letters to get a free subscription for 1 year to the Centre for Optimism. And perhaps you'd like to join us on a panel too. Just touch base with the contact details on our website. Go and have a brilliant day.